The first AP Top 25 poll is out, and Iowa State is on it. Let's go. That's super exciting. The question is, how big of a role will this play in Iowa State's season? It's just a ranking, right? I would venture to say that this is actually massive. This is going to have huge implications. We're talking about why today on Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you for being here every single day, making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcasting platform, wow. Be sure to hit subscribe so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Today, we're talking AP Top 25 and the safeties and cornerbacks. Yes, we're going secondary in the second half of today's episode. It only makes sense, right? Secondary. We'll talk about Deion Broomfield and Hank Poteet and what they had to say about their units. And honestly, my tune has changed a little bit on this secondary. If you've been here throughout the offseason, it hasn't been the position group I've talked the most highly of. So you're going to want to stick around to see what I think of them now. Can't wait to dive into all of that and more. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Now, let's talk about the AP Top 25 that just dropped yesterday. Had the whole college football world absolutely shook. Okay. For a couple different reasons. There were certainly a couple of teams on this list that I think a lot of people were maybe not the most supportive of them being in that position is the best way to put it kindly. I think Iowa State had a pretty reasonable ranking, though. I will say that. I don't think anyone was extremely upset about where Iowa State was. And honestly, I feel like I'm in the same boat for the most part. I'll talk about kind of the implications of where they're at and why I would like to maybe see them a little higher. But I think they're probably about right here in just a couple minutes. But let's talk about the top 25. Should we start at the top or the bottom? Feel like let's start at the top. Makes sense. Texas at 1, Penn State at 2. That was kind of the biggest topic of conversation, or at least one of them. Ohio State at 3. So now you don't have Texas, Ohio State 1, 2 to start the season. Not really our monkeys, right? No, our monkeys, not our circus. It is what it is. We weren't really fighting for that spot. You got Clemson at 4, Georgia at 5, Notre Dame 6, Oregon 7, Alabama 8, LSU 9, Miami 10. That's probably the biggest one that people were concerned about was Miami at 10 there. We're going to move on. Arizona State at 11, Illinois 12, South Carolina comes in at 13, Michigan 14. You got the Gators in Florida at 15, SMU comes in at 16, and then we've got Kansas State at 17, Oklahoma, very interesting, makes it in at 18, Texas A&M 19, Indiana 20, Ole Miss 21, yours truly, Iowa State at 22, Texas Tech at 23, Tennessee at 24, and Boise State at 25. Now, I'm not going to get into every gripe I have with this list because I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. This is the first preseason AP Top 25 poll. Like, we got a long ways to go, okay? And so this is going to play a large role this season because this is kind of like a starting point, and it's going to judge how people, or it's going to impact how people judge these teams. But for the most part, like, this isn't the end of the world. This isn't like the first CFP ranking or the final ranking or whatever. Like, this is the very beginning of the year. There's way more questions than answers right now because, to be honest, there are zero answers. They're just, nothing has been decided yet. We haven't played 1 second of the 2025-26 season. The clock hasn't even come off of 15 minutes in the first quarter. So to be super upset about these rankings feels like probably not the right play. Like, for example, if Miami at 10 really gets you upset, really gets you riled up, just entertain the idea that Miami wins literally every single game this season and they finish at 1. Like, then they undershot it, right? So that's where I'm like, I'm not going to get too worked up here. I want to talk more about the implications of this. I will say, though, Miami at 10, pretty wild. Oklahoma being on here after missing the coaches poll, which I know they're totally different. That one stood out to me. Illinois, I guess, is a team that people are very excited about. I'll have to see it for myself. And then Boise State at 25. Look, I love Boise State. I love the blue field. I just have a hard time believing that there is not one single Power 4 team, especially Big 12 teams, better than Boise State. That to me, I don't understand that. That just are you telling me that TCU or Baylor or even BYU is obviously in what's really going on there? But any one of those teams to me probably better than Boise State. I guess, like I said, we don't know for sure. Okay, we don't have an absolute answer to that. We don't have anything to compare against anybody, and even in most cases, the comparison game isn't really an answer anyway. So I'm not too bent out of shape about this list. Okay, and Iowa State coming in at 22 is awesome. And as I said, I believe it was last week talking about the Iowa State Kansas State game, Farmageddon over in Dublin. Now you've got a 17-22 matchup. Boom. Top 25 matchup to start off the season in Dublin, Ireland, rivalry game for the Big 12. I'm going to say this is the biggest opportunity the Big 12 has had in a long time. And that sounds probably a little crazy. There is probably an element of, well, yeah, he's a locked on Cyclones guy. Of course, he's going to say that. Yeah, you're probably a little bit right. But also, what just think with me, like, what would be the next best opportunity the Big 12 has had maybe in the last 5 years? I guess TCU in the national championship probably is up there. But I would even argue that this could be bigger than that. And maybe that's just because of how TCU performed in that game. Like maybe it's clouding my memory a little bit. But I do think that this is absolutely massive. It's got the eyes of everybody on it. It's going to be a huge game. It's the first game of the season. Kicks off bright and early. Obviously pulling in a whole nother country. It's a top 25. It's a rivalry matchup. Like, and on top of all of that, like the top 25 thing is cool and all, but like both of these teams are kind of like, we're absolutely fighting for the Big 12 title. You've got Arizona State, you've got Kansas State, Iowa State, and Texas Tech in this conversation of the top 25 teams from the Big 12. Like, yeah, Texas Tech really hasn't been talked about as much, but it's definitely Arizona State, Kansas State, and Iowa State, the three of the state schools from the Big 12 fighting for this Big 12 spot. So that makes this game worth that much more, right? It's not like you've got Iowa State, Texas Tech, like it just feels like not a lot of people are talking about them, but like if they were the ones to go over, it wouldn't be a rivalry game. It would still be top 25, but it's like, is this really a fight for the top of the Big 12? That's not the vibe I'm getting from Iowa State, Kansas State. It absolutely feels like we've talked all offseason about this game could point the program that wins on a trajectory of winning the conference. Like that's the way we're talking about this game. And so, yes, I do think this is absolutely massive for the Big 12 from a showcase standpoint, just to show the level of play that we have. And even more than that, I would argue that this is a great opportunity to show just how good of games the Big 12 has. And this is just from a fan perspective that I am saying this, but genuinely, I love watching Big 12 games. They are so exciting. Like 99% of the time, they're so good. They're so fun to watch. So Kansas State, Iowa State, always going to be a good game. Putting it on a national stage for everyone to watch to kick off the season. Like I can't tell you how many people watched, was it Florida State, Georgia Tech last year? And boy, was that the beginning of a downfall. But like everybody kind of saw it, and so now we're seeing it here with Iowa State, Kansas State. You're on maybe the biggest stage other than even the national championship. Like, is this bigger than the national championship? I would argue this might be bigger than the national championship, genuinely, now that I'm thinking about it, because every single college football fan, in my opinion, the way I'm perceiving this, okay, this is, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You can let me know on Twitter at Nick_Marv or in the comment section below. I will read them, and I will probably respectfully disagree. But my opinion is that every college football fan will at least have this game on, if not actually watch this game, because football is back, right? It's the first game of the season. It's a top 25 matchup. It's not just a couple no-name schools. Like, this is a legitimate game. Hopes are still high for everybody. The anticipation of the season is like, we're here. We've made it. Let's turn on the game that's on. We've waited how long to watch football? Put on the game. As opposed to the national championship where, let's say hypothetically, because we got 1 and 2, Texas and Penn State, Ohio State fans at number 3 in this ranking, which is completely arbitrary, they lose to Penn State or whatever, and they don't really want to watch a national championship game. It's like, we're not even in it. Or Florida loses in the first round. I don't really feel like watching. I watched a lot of football this season. I'm ready for next year. Just a guess, but I would argue that this is a bigger game for that reason. And the top 25 doesn't mean a whole lot. I do think it has implications, and it also really puts a good idea on a couple of teams that Iowa State has to face this season. So we're going to talk about their schedule coming up right here after this. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. My personal favorite feature by far is the panoramic seat view. I just really want to know what my seat looks like before I buy it. I don't want to end up behind some sort of pillar that's holding the stadium up or whatever. I want to know exactly what I'm looking at. How far away is it really? Game Time's got you covered with that panoramic seat view. It's second to none, in my opinion. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the AP Top 25, we kind of talked about here at Locked On Cyclones, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's important and at the same time completely worthless. Very fun, very interesting, okay? But it's not really the end-all, be-all. So I'm kind of in like a middle of the crossroads here with like, how do I really feel about this ranking? Very excited that Iowa State comes in at 22. Let's take a look at who they're going to be playing this season, and then we'll kind of round out this conversation with what this means down the road. I did mention three other teams from the Big 12 in the top 25. You got Texas Tech at 23, one below Iowa State. You've got Kansas State at 17, and you've got Arizona State at 11 above Iowa State there. So two teams ranked higher from the Big 12 than Iowa State. Now, Iowa not on this list. Just going to leave it at that. Not going to say anything else. I'm going to completely just state the fact that the University of Iowa is not on the AP Top 25 at this current moment in time. Okay. Anyways, so the reason I bring that up is because I'm just looking at Iowa State's schedule here. You play K-State 1, a top 25 matchup in the 17 overall right now, Kansas State. Then they will go a few weeks all the way up to the Arizona State game without playing another top 25 opponent at this current moment in time, right? So South Dakota, not in the top 25. Arkansas State, not in the top 25. Same thing for Arizona, Cincinnati, Colorado, right? So you've got 6 games with a bye in there, obviously, after following Kansas State, that you don't play a top 25 opponent at this current moment in time. And I will give me 1 second. When we get through the end of the schedule, I'll kind of talk about teams that I think could venture up into that top 25. Then you got another bye. So you got 6 games, 2 byes, no top 25 opponents. BYU, a team I think probably could have made the top 25 here. Then Arizona State, right? So you've got a good chunk of time in between top 25 matchups. So that's the reason I bring this up. I don't see this being a super, super hard at this moment in time, as far as rankings go. It's not like they're facing Texas, Penn State, Ohio State, Clemson to start the year. Like, yes, we've talked about how difficult the schedule is, and there are going to be ups and downs with it. But it's not like we have a ridiculous number of current AP ranked opponents. Now let's talk about guys that are opponents that I think could become ranked. I don't think Iowa will be ranked. And if they are, maybe like at 25 when we play them, play them. I don't think they will. I'm not too worried about them. I don't think Arizona or Cincinnati will become ranked. Colorado, though, that's week 7 of the season. I think they could definitely venture up into, I would say, somewhere between 20 and 25, kind of like where Iowa State is now. We'll have to see exactly if that's possible or where they end up landing. But I don't think that's impossible. I think that's a game that we could definitely circle. I think BYU is a team that could be in that conversation. I think Arizona State is a team that will stay in the top 25. I think TCU is a team to look out for. Do I think that they will automatically be in the top 25? No, and I don't necessarily feel the same way about Colorado. I would say I feel stronger that TCU could be in the top 25. The problem is that's kind of late in the season for TCU, and that means that they have to have sustained success for quite a while, or they have to get hot between weeks like 6 and 10. And I don't know if that's super likely. I don't think either of those play out, but also it's TCU. You never really know. And then Kansas and Oklahoma State, I don't think will make it. So the teams that I do think could end up on the top 25 that Iowa State will face at the time they're in the top 25, Colorado, BYU, Arizona State, TCU, all within 5 weeks, 4 straight games. Worth noting. I think that's a very rough stretch of the schedule for Iowa State. And who knows, maybe Kansas even sneaks in there. I doubt it. I really seriously doubt it, but it's not impossible. It's preseason. We don't know where this is going. Now, the last point I want to make on this top 25 here, and you know where this is going, so I will keep this pretty quick. And it's not necessarily that Iowa State's in the wrong spot. I'm not arguing that Iowa State should be in the top 10 right now. It's just that Iowa State does have to fight up from 22 now. So a team like in Arizona State is going to get a little bit more grace. They're going to get a little bit more leeway to make that top 12 just because they're starting there. If they drop the first 2 by 50 points and they fall out of the top 25, like now you're kind of in the same spot. But if you lose 1, you win 3 handedly, you lose 1 by like 3 points, and then you win out, you're in, I think. If Iowa State does that, are they in the top 12? Probably not. Probably not. That, to me, unless you're winning those last few games very handedly, sounds like a recipe for staying about where you're at, depending on what other teams do, of course, right? This is a ranking against other teams. But if all the other teams perform at roughly the same caliber, you're staying where you're going to stay with that relative schedule. I think if you go to 3 losses, you're definitely not, as Iowa State, in the top 12. I think at 2 with that schedule, you're probably exactly where you were. If you drop like the first 2, the losses, timing, and to who and by how much are the 3 question marks, and they all are extremely important. I think it's worth noting that being ranked 22, awesome, super cool. Is this like getting to their heads? Is this putting a chip on their shoulder? That's a conversation. Maybe we will have it tomorrow. But I think it's worth noting that you are absolutely fighting up here. So even if you do end up kind of ending the year at right around the like 20 mark, you get, fight for the Big 12 championship, whatever. But I do think it's worth noting they are fighting from 22. Just remember that. Super exciting to be at 22. I think it's really cool. But you're not starting at like 11, like Arizona State is. Now, let's pivot really quickly and knock out some secondary talk here in the second half of today's episode. This is good news. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Dion Broomfield and Hank Poteet talked about their safeties and corners yesterday. Great news. Just across the board. Like, I don't even have any one particular piece of news that, well, I do have some, but like one that stood out. It's just good news. It's just that this secondary unit is going to be good. Like, is that not exciting? For me personally, and I've said this before and I'm saying it now, and maybe I won't say it again. Maybe this will be the last time I say it. I thought that the secondary was Iowa State's weakest position group. And I will own that. And I said that on the record. And I am very open about that. That was what I thought based on the interviews that were kind of held by the coaches. Felt like all the other groups were very excited, jazzed, like super pumped up about their group. Our linebackers are going to come in and wreck the Big 12. Our tight ends are going to come in and tear the Big 12 to pieces. Like, that's what you want to hear. Rocco Beck's coming in better than ever. Like, it's kind of what you hear from like everybody, to be honest. Like, it's like if you don't hear that, there are now like, And that's kind of where I found myself with the secondary. It was honestly more of a, well, we're not really sure who the leaders are going to be yet. We lost a lot of leaders. We're going to have to see how this plays out. Like, who's going to step up? Who's going to take this role? So it's not that they necessarily are bad. Like, they were a great unit last year. It was just the vibe from the coaches that I was like, I would like to see how this plays out. Like, I really don't know who exactly is going to step up here. And luckily, I have the answer to that. And we're going to talk about that more right here after this. You're here with Locked On Cyclones for our Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's talk about the secondary. Let's fire through this because this is exciting. It just is, as I just said. So from Deon Broomfield, the names that he threw out were Jameson Patton, Drew Surges, and Jeremiah Cooper, as far as leaders go without Bo being on the team, right? Bo Freeler. And I will say, though, really quick nugget for those of you who made it to this point in the episode, pretty sure I just heard you hit subscribe, so major kudos to you for that. But if you are still here, I think I saw a tackling drill that Bo Freeler was holding the tackling bag on. If you go to my Twitter at Nick_Marv, I commented on it. It says, is that Bo Freeler? So go take a look at that. Let me know what you think. I think that could be a big deal. Like low-key, if he's hanging out with this team, getting them ready for this season. Like that the way that this team responded to Bo was, I think it's important to note that if he's there, like great things could be happening. Anyways, as far as those safeties go, Jameson Patton, a name that came up a lot. Drew Surges, really only mentioned a few times, but Jeremiah Cooper, a guy that was talked about time and time again. Marcus Neal, another name that was thrown in there, more so talked about his play style. What's he doing well? He's playing fast downhill and confident. What you want from a safety, right? But Jeremiah Cooper literally just kept coming up. This guy could be the answer for Iowa State. And Deon, or Coach Broomfield, had a lot of great things to say about Jeremiah Cooper. Obviously has great awareness. He's really quick. He's fast. He's lateral. That's what you want to hear. That's what you want to hear about your the potentially lead safety here. They talked about the standard of toughness that the safety and corners kind of have to exhibit. I think that's pretty important, especially with the history of last year with injuries. There was a little bit in the secondary for sure. I think everyone immediately thinks of the linebackers. But speaking of the injuries, Coach Broomfield was talking about what he learned from last year and having so many injuries. And really what he was talking about was learning to put the players in the best position possible to make plays. Now, that's kind of the role of like a DC. So you've got like your plays and like your little playbook, and you kind of try to pick the play that's going to put the players in the best position to make plays. Literally exactly what I just said. I understand that. But the concept being, if it's, and every play could work out. So you got to take that with a grain of salt. But like if it's, let's say 4th and 1 on the goal line. So 4th and goal from the 1. Are you going to run 8 deep, prevent defense, rush 3? Probably not. Probably going to blitz a lot of players. You're going to have to protect against the pass, but they're probably going to run it based on the team and all this history and stuff. That's kind of like putting your players in the best position. Now, every play can work out, but like putting injured players that are kind of struggling through a game in a high intensity, high responsibility position, maybe in a one-on-one position, that's like not necessarily putting your players in the best position to succeed. So that's what Deon Broomfield learned from last season. That was the first thing he talked about. And that's what makes me really excited about this coming season, is if he learned that last year, or one of the things he got better at last year, think about what they could do this year with a unit that is like fully healthy. That would be awesome, right? You've got a lot more, well, I would argue definitely talent, right? You definitely have talent. More or less is yet to be seen. But this is an opportunity for that secondary to flourish at full strength. And then obviously as the season goes on, we'll see how that goes. Knock on wood. Hopefully everyone on the entire Iowa State roster makes it through the season without even a bump or bruise. I think that'd be pretty cool. Untouched into the end zone every single play. And honestly, the line would be so dominant, they just plow everyone over. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit off track here. Thought it was worth talking about him putting those players in those positions. Something he thought he got better at, learned a little bit about. The other thing here, though, that I wanted to really talk about was the leadership was the thing that I was most concerned about with this secondary group. Broomfield talked about Jameson Patton having brought in guys, at 10 a.m. on an off day, just kind of said it offhand, talking about him moving into a leadership role from that role guy position. That is what I wanted to hear. That, to me, was the biggest nugget in this press conference from Broomfield. There are guys stepping up into the leadership position, into that leadership role. And that's what I was worried about. Who was going to do it? Once we got that question answered, I feel fine. I'm not too worried. But who is it going to be? Sounds like it is going to be Cooper and Patton potentially. Now, to transition over to the corners, it's worth mentioning that Broomfield and Pody kind of talked about like they're kind of interchangeable. Like they coach both groups, and we're going to put players in the best position we can. So if Jontes is going to go play corner or safety this drive, maybe it's Jeremiah Cooper who's going all over. Was a player that they talked about moving between the positions. So definitely worth mentioning. Now, as far as the actual corners go, Trey Bell has been balling out, a guy to watch out for. Of course, that he's got the length, the speed, he can really run. But Benny Ngoye is a player that I think a lot of people have piqued interest about. I think it's a guy that absolutely draws a lot of attention just because of his story, right? Transitioning from wide receiver, but it sounds like he could be the real deal. He could be the perfect fit. Obviously, DP last year, we saw how good he was, and we'd like to see that kind of success from Benny Ngoye. I think it's possible. The way that they're talking about this guy has me amped up. And why? One of the big reasons is because when you make the switch from wide receiver to DB, you know what the wide receivers are doing. You understand it. You don't just know. You know. Like it's in your bones. It's in your DNA, right? So you understand this is a flag route. This is where we're attacking on a flag route under this, coverage that we're seeing. This is how we're going to try to leverage the safety or the corner or whatever. When you understand that and you know what coverage you're in and you know how the wide receiver is likely to attack that kind of puts you a step ahead. Just think about it. If you know that they're going to attack let's just make it super, super simple. In a man coverage, if a player is attacking the outside shoulder, what could they really do here, right? There are options, and that's why you watch tape. But if it's a quick movement, a quick hitter, and they're attacking the outside shoulder, they're probably coming back to the inside on a slant of some kind, depending on a lot of different factors. Let's just make up that scenario. If you know that that's what the offense is trying to do when they're attacking the outside shoulder in a short yardage situation, is they are trying to get back to the inside, you can kind of get there a millisecond faster. All of this to say, Benny Ngoye seems to have a very deep understanding of the offense and now the defensive side of the ball and could be an absolute weapon for Iowa State. And I wonder if this is something down the road, which we could talk about in a future show. Is this something that Iowa State does? Takes guys, trains them up as wide receivers, and then transitions them over to DBs in their junior year or whatever. Like, possible, very possible. A lot of depth of knowledge coming from that wide receiver position to translate over to DB. I genuinely think that that's a very legitimate advantage. And Benny Ngoye, they've talked about, he has all of the tools. He's very quick and lengthy and speedy as well, as far as Trey Bell to him, very similar in that aspect. But he's been pretty smooth. The transition and his football IQ is very high. So great things from Coach Poteet as far as Benny Ngoye. Last couple guys here that were mentioned: Quentin Taylor, physical, smart, good tackler, and then Cooper playing the corner position is, I think, important because that's going to mix up what the defense is looking at, right? So if you've got, let's say, MLB 1 is number 3, and you see him lined up real tight off the right side of the line, there's immediately question marks there. Like, what is going on? Something is off. But if you've got Jeremiah Cooper who can go from safety to corner fluidly, you don't know what's going on in the defense. You can't make a read, right? This could be just normal. This could be some sort of stunt. This could be something different. So I think that's an absolute weapon, putting Jeremiah Cooper all over the field, just keeping offenses guessing. And obviously with the rest of the secondary unit being as good as the way they're talking about it, I think that that's a big deal. I'm very excited about the secondary unit. Let's just wrap it up like that. Genuinely think that this could be a very, very good unit. And that's something I've been kind of hinting at throughout the last couple of weeks after I initially thought the secondary group might be the weakest. But I think now, the way I'm seeing it, Iowa State just going to be really good all across the board. 22 in the AP poll, maybe underranked. Maybe they should be at 10. Just a thought. I guess we'll see where they end up in a few weeks because football season is almost here. We are really, really dangerously close to this first game over in Dublin, Ireland. All right, that's going to do it for today. Thank you guys for making it to this point in the episode. Be sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already. It's completely free, and we're proving it's a Cyclone state. That being said, until next time, Cyclone fans, stay safe out there, and sayonara.